limited necessarily to the core courses, but it is kind of geared towards study tips and how to approach exam questions and things like that. So whether or not you are in one of the MCB core courses now or will be in the future, hopefully this helps. And also if you are in a different science course, like an IB course or a chemistry course maybe as well. So we kind of keep it a little bit general for that purpose. My name is Oliver Stenger. I'm the course coordinator for MCB 354, which is the Majors Biochemistry lecture in our core curriculum. I'm a life science teaching specialist. I'm also the MCB merit director, and my contact information is up here. Whether or not you take a class in the MCB core, if you ever have questions or want to talk to us in the core, feel free to come see me. My office is over in Davenport in the main MCB core curriculum office. And just something that I want to mention today is that many of you guys, hopefully all of you guys, see your academic advisors, right? So your MCB or IB advisor, or whatever major you happen to be in if you're not MCB or IB. And that's great. And then you really should also consider visiting your course coordinator. So all of us in MCB that are course coordinators are biologists, and many of us have a background in education as well. We work with the faculty to help design the courses. We're the ones who work on the discussion planning of the course, the lab sections. So whenever you have questions about specific things within a course, if you're in a class that has a coordinator, please come see us. We can really talk to you a lot about how the course is going. We can give you tips about study success and all kinds of different things relating to the actual content for our particular courses, because we are responsible for those and we work with those courses directly, one-on-one. So today we're going to talk about a few different things. We're going to talk about critical thinking and how it relates to some things that you'll be doing in your classes. We're going to talk in general terms about reading and note-taking in science courses. We're going to talk about approaching exams in your science courses, so in MCB, but in some of your other courses as well. We'll talk a little bit about learning styles and how that might influence the way that you study and prepare for your exams. And then we're going to do a review on time management, because obviously time management is super important. And I'm sure you guys have seen that already if you haven't. So I want you guys to think for a second about what you think are some things that will make you successful in biology courses. So you can write it down, you can think about them. Two things you think are going to be important for success in bio. Does everyone have an idea of one? At least one? Yes. Labs. Okay. What are other things that are important for succeeding in biology? Yes.
Like constantly reviewing the material throughout the semester.
Reviewing the material throughout the semester, yes.
Not just memorizing, but trying hard to understand the concepts of what's going on.
Perfect. So, understanding concepts. Yep.
And understanding before you move on, because it kind of builds.
Absolutely. Everything builds. Anybody else come up with a different one? So we all know there's a lot of things we can do, right? And so this workshop, we're going to talk about some of those, review some of those things, and maybe include some new ones that maybe you haven't thought about in the past. So, all right, let's think about this for a second. How many times have you seen a penny? So everyone has seen a penny, right? You know, change isn't as common as it was now that everyone uses their credit cards and debit cards and things. But in general, everyone's seen a penny, right? So what are some things that are on a penny? Who's on the penny?
Lincoln.
Lincoln, right? Is Lincoln facing right or left on the penny?
Left.
Someone says left, other people say they're not sure. What else is on the penny besides Lincoln's face?
The Lincoln Memorial. The Lincoln Memorial.
The Lincoln Memorial?
On the back.
On the back, okay. We're getting advanced. Front of the penny. Let's stick to front of the penny for now. What other things are on the front of the penny? A date, right? And is the date on the right side of Lincoln or the left side of Lincoln? What else is on there? Some words, probably, right?
Yeah, shorthand, like written out 1 sentence.
Okay.
In God we trust. Is that on the front of the packet somewhere?
Somewhere, maybe, right? Alright, so what if we see a bunch of pennies? Which one looks like it might be right? So we've got some going left, some going right. We've got some that have years on them. We have some that say words on them. So some say in God we trust, some say United States of America, some say liberty. What do you guys think? Which one do you think is the correct penny? Anyone have a good guess?
E.
E? Anyone else?
J.
Okay. Alright, so the answer is A. A is the correct penny. But just the exercise in this is just to kind of illustrate a point that we see a penny all the time. Just how you see some of those biological concepts you're learning in your class over and over again, right? So you might have learned about things from high school that you're still learning about now in your MCB classes. Things like cell division or cell structure, DNA replication, right? So those things come up again and again and again. And we've been exposed to them a ton, just like the penny. We think we understand it, we think we know what it is, but then when you have to really think about it, it's kind of hard to really break it down and explain all the parts of it. And so just think about that as you guys study, because some of these concepts you're going to see again and again in your courses, but the way that you're going to be asked to understand those and apply that information is going to be really different. And so this takes us into the notion of scientific teaching. So this is probably something that you guys aren't familiar with, and that's totally fine, and that's why we're going to talk about it today. And this is a teaching philosophy for structuring science courses that many of us on campus are using. And this is something that we use in our MCB core curriculum. So all of us in the core courses from MCB 150 to 354 do this, and some of the upper level courses do as well. And basically what it comes down to is approaching education and teaching of science in a scientific method, if you will. So the first thing that we do in scientific teaching is we set goals and outcomes. And what that means is what we want students to be able to do. And it's in student terms. And so we will write those goals and outcomes. They can be for a particular lesson. It can be for a lecture. It can be for a unit during the semester. It can be overarching for the entire semester. And it can span across courses. So in each of our core courses, we have a set of goals and outcomes. You might see in your lectures, those first slides, the professor says this is what you guys should get out of today's lecture. There's a lecture goals and outcomes, there's a course overall goals and outcomes, and then there's the semester-long goals and outcomes. And then we look at it through the whole curriculum. So starting with what you learn in MCB 150 and what we want you to get out of the curriculum by the time you finish in 354. And overall, the major wants you guys to have a set of goals and outcomes as well. So we start with goals and outcomes. And then we look at assessment and evaluation. So we come up with these things that we want you guys to be able to do and understand and be able to work within your courses, but then we need to figure out a way to see if you guys have gotten those concepts down, right? So we give you exams, we evaluate you, we might give you assignments, quizzes, homeworks, different ways in which we can test to see if you're learning that material that we're covering. And then we plan our activities to hopefully prepare you guys for those exams. So the activities go along with the assessment and the evaluation. And then what we do is we look at alignment. So what that means for us is we look to see, did the assignment or the activity or the exam measure those goals and outcomes accordingly? And if it doesn't, then we adjust. And so we do this every semester all the time, so we kind of experiment on you guys. And we change things a little bit every time in order to get those things to line up as best as possible. And part of scientific teaching also is really encouraging collaboration and diversity. So we'll do a lot of things in your classes where you're working in groups, where you're working with other students. In lab, you're gonna have lab partners, those kinds of things. And so this is all in an effort purposefully to get you guys working together, thinking about the science, and talking about the different goals and outcomes that we're intending for you guys. How many people have heard of Bloom's taxonomy? Has anybody heard of this? Okay, good. Because this is actually a really, really big thing, and this is one of the things that we think very carefully about in our courses. And I think a lot of students don't even know that it's happening, and so I'm really happy to be able to introduce this to you. So when we look at information in the classes, we design questions, we design activities, we design exams to go through levels of Bloom's. And there's different levels that are listed in the columns. The most basic is the factual level, followed by conceptual, procedural, and metacognitive. So the most basic level is facts. You need to know a lot of stuff, absolutely. So things like definitions and terminology, you have to know that so that you can understand the things in more complex terms later. But in your classes in MCB and in many of your science classes on campus, that's not the kind of thing we're going to test you on. We're not going to give you exam questions that are memorization or just giving us bad definitions. We're hoping you already know that so that when we give you a more advanced question, you can apply those concepts. And so conceptual is really what we're focusing on. Conceptual and then procedural. Procedural is pretty easy for us to do in labs and things like that. But we're also going to design exam questions and activities in your lecture courses to hopefully do that. And then the highest level is metacognitive, where you're putting all of those pieces together. You're self-aware. You self-acknowledge what you know and what you don't. And so we'll talk a little bit more about Bloom's and do a little activity in a second. So here's another slide about Bloom's. And there's different cognitive dimensions to Bloom's as well. So those are listed in the column there. Things like remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. And so we, as a curriculum, are trying to get you guys to the higher levels, the analyze, the evaluate, the create, essentially. And then I've listed some example verbs there so that you get a feel for the types of questions that you might see. And think about engaging in critical thinking. Like I said, we need to move past memorization. You do have to know some facts, but that's not going to be the bulk of what you're tested on. We're going to really ask you guys to apply concepts to new situations. We want you guys to study actively. So that might mean actively writing notes as you study when you go over your PowerPoints or you read your book. It might mean working with a study buddy or being in a study group. We are going to have you guys ask questions. So either to yourselves as you write down your notes, or in class, or at office hours, or to people in your study group. And a good reason that it's great to have a study group is because you get to hear multiple points of view. So sometimes you think you understand something, you get into your study group, you realize maybe you didn't so much, or maybe you understand something better than one of your group mates, and you can explain it to them. And we always say the best way to know if you understand something is if you can teach it to somebody else. And that's why study groups are really important. And then we want you guys to draw conclusions when you're thinking critically. So you have to be able to kind of think in an exam way. So what types of things would a professor ask you? What would the conclusion of that be? And you will, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So reading is really important in science. You guys all know you should be reading your assigned readings, right? So in some of the courses they're very specific, and other courses they're more general. It kind of depends on the course, but you should definitely be reading. You should survey the reading before you go to class. Go through it. When you're reading, you should look at any terms that are unfamiliar to you, any equations that are unfamiliar to you. Notice any graphics. So we take a lot of time in our MCB curriculum deciding on which books we use for our courses. And the content's pretty much the same, right? It's biology. But the way in which the chapter is laid out, the supplemental material that comes with the text, those are all really important decisions for us. And so one of the things that we always look at are the graphics. So if there are graphs, if there's charts, if there are boxes, those are things to focus on. We might not necessarily take a question directly out of that section and put it on an exam, but it's probably a really important concept. And so if the author of the book thought it was important enough to put in a box, it's probably an important concept. Other things you should be doing is writing down questions. Again, filling in your notes and talking to your TA or your instructor if you have questions. Actively reading for details, so pay really close attention to the details. And then look over examples and how the content relates. So whenever you have anything that has a worked example in the book, again, another great opportunity to focus in on that. And then see how that relates to what you're learning in lecture. And then as you are looking through, you'll see questions at the end of sections, questions at the end of the chapter. Go through those questions. Can you answer those questions? If you're not sure, go back into reading and review the reading until you feel pretty comfortable about that. And then map or outline. A lot of students benefit from visual work, and so if you can draw yourself a picture or a concept map or some sort of outline that goes along with your reading, that might be really helpful to you. And we will talk about note-taking in a second. Today's today, right? Today's today. Okay, so general note-taking. So first thing, take effective notes for you. Everyone is going to have a slightly different learning style. Everyone is going to benefit from slightly different things. So try to pick something that you find helpful. Try considering taking notes in a different format. So things like, again, I said concept maps, outlines, bulleted lists. You might benefit from color coding things. It just is going to be helpful for you to stay organized. Identify main ideas and then fill in the details. Don't write everything. It's really tempting to want to write every single thing down. And I think a lot of our students try to do that in lecture. You're probably going to miss some stuff. A lot of our students record the lectures, and that can be helpful if you go back and review those later, and then you can fill in those gaps. But trying to write down every single thing that's said is pretty impossible. I mean, keep yourself as organized as possible. The more organized you are, the better you're going to be throughout the semester. For most of our courses, we have our PowerPoints available on the website to download, and so print those out. Anything, especially that has a diagram, that's a lot easier to label and write yourself notes. We have a lot of visuals in biology, a lot of diagrams, a lot of pictures. And so making sure that you can just download that and fill it in as opposed to trying to draw it all yourself is probably going to be faster and easier. And then some more specifics for note-taking in science. One big one is to write equations, formulas, diagrams, graphs. Anything that you see like that, those are going to be things that come up over and over again. You might not have to have everything memorized for an exam. You might get like a sheet with equations or something. But the more you're familiar with those, the easier it is to use those when it comes time to take a test. Another thing is to quote the instructor's technical terms. So there's certain professors who will say a word a lot or some terms a lot. You can probably bet that that's also going to be on the test, or the way that they say that it's going to be on the test. If you're not sure what that is, jot it down and put it in quotes and then go look that up later. Worked examples, doing them step by step and showing all the work step by step. This one's really important, I think, because a lot of students will look at an answer key and think they know how to do the question. If you then get the question on an exam, on a blank sheet of paper, it's a lot more challenging to try to reconstruct that. So the more you've worked through things step by step and have practiced them, the better it'll be when it comes time for the real thing. And consider writing your notes instead of typing them. There's been a lot of articles recently, especially coming out about how there's a benefit to manually, physically writing them instead of typing. for various reasons. I encourage you to look at those articles. I know it's really easy and tempting since everyone has their laptops and everyone's always at lecture with their computers. But think about writing your notes. In MCB 354, for example, we have really tried to incorporate a lot of lecture content on a document camera. And we found that with some of our math problems, the calculations and the step-by-step process, it's just not as beneficial to do it on a PowerPoint slide. So we tried to make the effort to do worked examples like that in class, and I think it's throwing students for a loop because you can hear everybody rustling in their backpacks trying to grab a piece of paper at the last minute. But that's why we're doing it. We want to really solidify those concepts, and writing them down in a step-by-step method is going to really teach you guys how to approach those questions. Listen to other students' questions. Even if you don't have questions, keep your ears open for other people asking things. Because a lot of times those are the questions that you might have, or you might realize later you also had that question. There are lots of common misconceptions, common confusion in a lot of our courses, so chances are that somebody else is going to ask something that applies to you as well. Use symbols and highlight and color code, and whatever you can do to keep your notes more organized is, again, going to be helpful. Refer back to the textbook after class. And so we talk about doing the reading before class, do the reading again after class. This will help fill in anything that you've missed, and also gives you just another opportunity to review. And the more times you can review that material, the better. And then keep old class notes for the future. So I think this is important because all of the core courses build on each other. So if you covered something in MCB 150, you're probably going to see it in 250 or 252, and you're going to see it even more detail in things like 354. Another reason why it's great to keep class notes is that most of you guys are pre-med or pre-professional or want to go to grad school or whatever, and if you start keeping all of your notes and your notes are nice and organized, you're creating a study guide for yourself. So instead of studying for the MCAT and the GRE with just trying to get yourself all organized again, if you keep all those class notes that you had originally, this will just be easier for you in the future as well. And really, everything does build on each other, which is another good thing. If you didn't understand the first time, make sure that you don't continue with those same issues, because everything's going to build. And not just in MCB, in chemistry as well. So if Gen Chem was a struggle, if Organic Chem was a struggle, 354 is going to be a struggle too. So all of those courses are all related to each other. Attending class. We are all expecting you guys all to be in class and in lecture. It's important to do the reading, do any assignments that you might have, any pre-class assignments, pre-lecture questions. Make sure you review the syllabus. So a lot of times there's readings on the syllabus, but important dates. So things like quiz dates and exam dates and any different things that might be happening throughout the semester. I had several students miss quiz 1 because they didn't read the syllabus in 354. Make use of all your class materials. So for a lot of you guys, you'll have an e-text or access to some sort of online thing that goes along with your textbook. Even if it's things that aren't assigned to you, go in there and review questions in there. Most of them have animations, tutorials, things that you can practice that maybe aren't part of the course, but they're available to you. They're resources that you have. And get organized. Make sure that you know when things are. Make sure you've mapped out, and we'll talk about time management at the end of the workshop. But the more organized you are, the better. Participate in class. So actively listen. Listen for concepts, for central ideas. Decide levels of importance of the things that are being talked about. Ask questions. Listen to other students' questions. As you're writing your notes, organize, categorize, and really focus on the lecture. I can't tell you how many times we see students on social media and doing other things in class, and I know that that's tempting, but you're going to miss things. You just are. So make sure that you're actively participating. And then preparing for exams. So this is just a list of suggestions and tips. I say prepare physically and emotionally, and what I mean by that are, well, a couple things. One, it's really stressful, right? It's really hard to have all your exams around the same time, which tends to be what happens because all of us have about an exam a month in our courses. So stress management, making sure that you're resting, that you're sleeping, that you're taking care of yourself, making sure that you're eating. We always have students that get all kinds of medical things happening. We've had to call the ambulance because students are eating M&Ms and Red Bull for days at a time. So eat food, make sure you've slept, take care of yourselves. Design an exam plan, and this starts before the exam itself. So thinking ahead of time of when you're going to study, how you're going to break that up, leading up to the exam especially, all of your time management stuff will come in handy. Consider joining a study group. There's lots of benefits to that. We've talked about some of those already, but really when you're coming into these courses where there's a lot of content, a lot of material, it's really beneficial when you talk to students about the content. Do your work regularly, so do homeworks, even if it's not graded. So you'll see a lot of that in things like chemistry and math. You might not have to turn anything in for credit, but we're going to expect that you're doing that work. And so the more practice you get, the better when it comes time to the real exam. Attend class and be on time. Most of us do announcements at the beginning of class. So if you show up 5 minutes late, you might have missed some tips, some upcoming event. For example, in our class today, we did an announcement in the first 5 minutes about optional group tutoring coming up this week. So if students didn't go, they might have missed that. We do put it on the website, but again, it helps to be on time and to hear those things. Keep a list of terms and things like that. Create a study guide for yourself. Anything that you can do leading up to the exam to be as prepared as possible. In our courses, you can't cram. You just can't. It's just not going to work. You have to be studying every day, every week, throughout the month for those exams. Doing things at the last minute is not going to work well for you. And then for actually the day of the exam, taking those exams, read the directions carefully, very carefully. There are little things that you might miss if you don't read all of the information on the test booklet. Consider the best use of your time, and this will depend on the class. For most of our courses, they're multiple choice exams. Some of the courses will have short answer, and you need to map out part of your plan of how you're going to tackle those. Jot down ideas or notes. For pretty much all of our courses, you get to keep that booklet at the end of the exam period. And so anything that you want to write down right away, or I had a student last semester that would write herself little motivational things at the top of every page, that's totally fine. Whatever you want to do that you think is helpful, you can write all over that booklet. That's your booklet to keep. Answer the easy questions first. So go through and look at the ones that you know for sure. Answer those, get them out of the way. You can kind of move on and go on to something else. Pay special attention to keywords. And so when I talked about blooms, things like analyze, compare, define. Think about those particular terminology that's used and how those are used in the questions, because that'll really help you figure out what exactly that question is asking and what they're expecting you to do. And like I said, most of our courses are going to have multiple choice. A good way to approach a multiple choice question is just to read the question stem and then stop and don't look at the answer choices. And think, can you predict what that answer is supposed to be? So do that first. And then when you look at the answer choices, evaluate each of the particular answer choices and decide what's wrong about that statement, what's right about that statement. Sometimes we very strategically put tricky things in there, not to trick you, but to see if you really understand the concepts. So instructors are really good about knowing misconceptions, and so they will purposely put those things in there. So it's really important to read each of those statements carefully. Another thing that happens on exams is we might put an answer choice in that is a true statement, but it doesn't answer the question. So be aware of those types of things as well, especially in multiple choice questions. And for most of our exams, you should have enough time to stay and check your answers. Be careful about that. Be careful about how you bubble in the questions on your answer sheet for Scantron exams. It's really easy to get off by one and then everything kind of gets messed up. So Just go through, double check, make sure you've answered all the bubbles on the answer sheets. And probably one of the most important things, and what I think students probably don't like to do, is review those graded exams. So after you've gotten the test back and you've got your grade, it's really easy, especially if you didn't do as well as you wanted to put it aside and just move on to the next exam. And that's tempting. But it's really useful to look at those exams again, to look through the questions that you got wrong and see if you can figure out why you got them wrong. So this is for you to further understand. So sometimes you're going to see things on exams that will be asked again and again on these different exams in different ways. And maybe you just weren't careful and didn't read the question carefully, and that's one thing. But it's another thing if you just missed a key concept. You should really, if you have questions about those exams, go talk to the professor. Talk to the instructor, come see your course coordinator. We are more than happy to review those exams with you to help you figure out what you can improve on for next time. I know it's not fun, especially if it's not the grade that you wanted, to look at those again, but that's a really good learning opportunity because you don't want to do the same thing on the next exam. And everything is going to build. So if you didn't understand something on exam 1, then it's going to be hard to understand the concepts on exam 2. And if you didn't do well in 250, it's going to be hard to understand the concepts in 252. So everything is just building on each other. So the more you can go back and understand where you went wrong, the better it will be for you. Really quickly talking about learning styles. There's lots of different learning styles. This is just an example of one of the ways to look at that. So we have students that are visual learners, we have students that like to hear things, we have students that like to read and write, we have students that like to do things manually. And so depending on where you are in this, just think of some different ways that you might study. Some students really like to just write and rewrite things and read quietly. That's probably me. But there's some students that really like to sketch things out. So concept maps and drawing and making little notes and things like that. We have students that love doing flashcards to help remember things. That's something that never worked for me, but I've seen a lot of students who use it. But one reason that I put this up here is because I see a lot of students who try to do whatever their friends are doing. And that might not be the best way for them to learn. So just because you see other people doing things a certain way doesn't mean you have to do it that way. That might not be the best way for you to do it. So think about that. Think about your own personal learning style and what might benefit you the most. And going along with that is your personality. So there's tons of online personality tests that you can take that are fun, but some things that might affect how you study and how you prepare for things. If you are really chatty and you really like talking to people and you're really extroverted, study groups might be awesome for you. If you absolutely hate working with other people, maybe that's not the best thing. So it really does depend on what is going to help you the most. And really that can affect how you respond to how things are going too. So your interpersonal skills, how you work with others, your adaptability, how well do you, if something goes wrong, are able to kind of move past that, or something that you're going to really linger on. Stress management is really important too. We have lots of exams, a lot of content, a lot of stuff going on for most of our students. We are also doing things like volunteering and working in a research lab and doing a lot of other activities. And so it gets stressful, especially around exam time. Things like your general mood. Are you the type of person who doesn't do well in something and then that motivates you more to do better? Or are you the type of person who kind of lets that affect them and thinks about that more? It might totally depend on the way that you study for your courses. And so to think about how you can improve your outcomes, you need to think about identifying your own strengths and weaknesses. You are the one who knows best about that, about yourself. And in order to do that, you need to also set realistic goals. So think about your time management, your plan of attack for the semester, for your courses, and you do need to set goals, but they should be realistic goals. If you're saying that you're going to study 8 hours a day, but you only have 3 hours available in your schedule, then that's not going to work. So you have to plan accordingly. And you do need to formulate a plan. That's going to be really important to maintain that throughout the semester. And you need to check in with your progress. And so if you have a plan in place and you're just not doing what you had set out to do, then that's fine, but you probably need to reevaluate your plan and think of some other things to do instead. And then we're going to just talk a little bit about time management, because everyone should already know how important time management, especially if you're in a biology class or a science curriculum. So realistically, how many days a week do you study? How long should you be studying, right? There's the typical thing you hear that for every hour in class you should be studying 3 or 4 hours. I don't think a lot of students do that, but that's kind of the expectation that we have for you guys as well. Do you schedule yourself study time? Do you have a plan in place? And do you actually follow through with your plan and do the hours that you plan to do? How many of you guys have looked at this planning chart? So this is on the MCB website on the advising page. They have 2 different types of study plans of planning forms. So this one pretty much takes you from an 8 a.m. to midnight for every day of the week. And this is a great way to start mapping out your schedule and including when you're going to study. Things like when you're going to read your textbook, when you're going to review your notes, when you're going to go to office hours. Planning out just a weekly, day-to-day thing. And then we also have this other version of a schedule. And on this one, this is really laying out your exams. So when are all your exam dates in all of your courses? And then for all of your courses, contact information for your instructor, your TA, and then their office hours. And so both of these together are going to be really helpful to plan and manage your time. Because that, again, is one of the most critical things. And the back of the time management sheet that's on the advising website has just kind of an overview. Everything that's on there is on the back of the sheet. So pretty much what, when, why, where, and how much. So this will give you help you give you a good visual too of the amount of time that you're studying, but thinking of other things that you have to do, other obligations that you might have, if you have a job, if you are volunteering, if you're working in a lab, anything else that's going to take time, time in between classes. It also encourages you to set up a place to go study that is distraction-free. So if there's a particular place that you'd like to study, think about that. And then just think about realistically how much time it takes to do these things. I think it's really helpful to write it down because in our head sometimes we think that we have more time than we do. And if you don't like the paper version, do an electronic version, like on a calendar, some calendaring system. Really try to block out individual hours of the day so that you can see where your time is going. And that really helps you also in case you need to revise your plan. And so just an overview, time management skills really have to do with setting your own personal goals, setting your priorities to meet those goals, anticipating unexpected events. And so if you have a pretty nice set schedule, if something else comes up, it's a little bit easier to adjust than if you just are kind of all over the place. It kind of helps you deal with that better. You're able to take control of your time, and hopefully you make that commitment to follow through and carry out your scheduled plan. So all of those things are going to be things to think about for time management. And again, refer to the MCB Advising website for those handouts and really think about mapping out an entire schedule. So we talked about a lot of things today, and just think again now, for you personally, what are some things that you can do throughout the semester that you think might help you that maybe you weren't doing before, and how that might affect your semester and how you might do in your biology coursework. And then I want to leave you with this image of riding a bike. So how did you learn how to ride a bike? You didn't read about it in a book and study it, right? You had to do it. You had to practice it. That's the same thing with biology, with science. You will have to read, you'll have to take notes, you'll have to go to lecture, but you have to practice study skills, time management skills, how to answer questions. Those are skills. And they're not necessarily the easiest things to do, but they get better with practice, but you have to work at it. So it's just like riding a bike. You might not do great at the beginning, you might have some people help you have some training wheels, but eventually you're going to get to the point where you're comfortable, and it might take a while. So don't get discouraged if your time management plan doesn't work out great, or you're not making the progress that you hope that you would. You just have to work at it, and it'll improve just like any other skill. So today we talked about critical thinking, we talked about note-taking and reading in science, we talked about the way to approach exams in our science courses, we talked about different learning styles and how that might affect how you approach studying in your courses, and then we did a review on time management. And then finally, I just want to leave you with, and this is from our MCB advising website as well, some comments from students, MCB current and former students, about their tips and their suggestions that they would give to other students. And you'll see things on there like going to office hours, reviewing the PowerPoints, talking to the professors are all things that we talked about. And then there's some other things on there like getting involved, joining an RSO and meeting new people, all of those things that are just little tips from our students themselves. All right, any questions about today's workshop and the content that we covered?